Up next in the broadcast, after capping a record-high approval rating after her first 6 months in office, President Park Geun-hye pledges to reform the nation's intelligence agency, which faces charges of influencing last year's presidential election. Japan's Abe administration continues its push to turn itself into a full-fledged military force, but recent opinion polls suggest that most citizens in Japan are strongly against the move. Thousands of firefighters continue with efforts to stamp out the massive fire in Northern California, where close to 150,000 acres have gone up in flames. Primetime News begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Monday, August 26th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Han Da-eun filling in for Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you for joining us. We begin with President Park Geun-hye's pledge to reform the nation's spy agency amid claims from the opposition party that the NIS was involved in a smear campaign against then opposition party candidate Moon Jae-in.
During a meeting with her senior secretaries on Monday, President Park said she's determined to reform the National Intelligence Agency so it can properly fulfill its role of taking charge of national security. She also made it clear that she did not use or receive any help from the spy agency during last year's presidential election. Instead, the president said she feels grief from the corruptive practices that have carried over from past administrations.
Sunday marked the 6 months since President Park Geun-hye took office, and analysts are taking the opportunity to examine what her administration has accomplished and where it's fallen short.
And we will do the same with an in-depth look at President Park's performance over the past 6 months. For that, we're joined by our presidential office correspondent, Jin-ju, in the studio. So, Jin-ju, what do people here in Korea say about President Park's first 6 months in office?
Well, more than half of the people here in the nation thought that President Park is doing a good job. If we look at this graph, President Park's approval rating has steadily increased since her inauguration in February. She was what experts call a slow starter. Her approval rating in early April was at 41%, but this figure jumped to 54% in a recent survey announced on the third week of August. Now, this figure, 54, is almost double that of former Presidents Roh Moo-hyun and Lee Myung-bak's at the 6-month mark. Their approval ratings at around that time stood at 29 and 24, respectively, a big drop from the approval rating they received in their first to second months in office. In President Roh's case, the low marks were the result of a conflict with the conservative camp, while in the case of the Lee administration, a controversial decision to resume U.S. beef imports despite public concern over mad cow disease.
So, Jin-ju, what are some of President Park Geun-hye's policies that are being well received by experts?
Well, Sean, looking at the change in her approval rating, we can see what President Park did well or did not do well. In April, her failed nominations and appointments dragged down her approval ratings to its lowest point of 41%. And this figure started to pick up around May, ironically due to North Korea's continued threats. Let's take a further look. Even after the North unilaterally shut down the inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex in April, President Park wasn't swayed by Pyongyang's threats and consistently upheld her North Korea policy, making it clear that there will be no compromises made on such provocative behavior. Her strategy eventually drew the North back to the negotiating table, which resulted in a joint agreement between the two Koreas, stating there will be no further halts at the business park and the two will work towards globalization of the complex.
저는 이번 합의를 계기로 과거 남북 관계의 잘못된 관행을 바로잡고 상생의 새로운 남북 관계가 시작되기를 바람하지 않습니다.
President Park also proved her strength in diplomacy. Her approval rating hit its highest point at 63% after she made visits to the U.S. in early May and China in late June. During the bilateral summits with U.S. President Barack Obama and Chinese President Xi Jinping, President Park was able to secure full support from both countries on her push for a trust-building process with North Korea.
And we're determined to be fully prepared for any challenge or threat to our security, and obviously that includes the threat from North Korea.
The situation on the Korean Peninsula is heading in a positive direction, and we hope that related countries can work together to quickly resume the six-party talks.
In particular, Presidents Park Geun-hye agreed that North Korea's nuclear program is unacceptable under any circumstances. Experts say that although it might be too early to talk about a denuclearized peninsula, she made a meaningful first step towards her trust-building process with the North. People also gave her high grades for pushing to root out corruption, including the administration's hunt for ex-President Chun Doo-hwan's illegal assets, which he owes to state.
전직 대통령의 그 추징금 문제도 과거 10년 이상 쌓여온 일인데 역대 정부에서 해결을 못하고 이제서야 새 정부가 의지를 갖고 해결을 하려고 하고 있습니다.
President Park has put forth the goal of, quote, normalizing abnormal practices and is strongly pushing ahead with investigation into corruption scandals in the nuclear power plant sector and audit results of the Four Rivers Restoration Project.
Jinju, then in what areas could President Park Geun-hye make further improvements?
Well, Tan, if we go back to the graph, the main reason in the drop of her approval rating from nearly 60% to 54% was the tax code overhaul announced on the 8th. This resulted in strong backlash from the opposition party and much of the public as the proposal increased taxation on some 4.3 million salaried employees with an annual income of more than $31,000, many of them falling into the middle-class bracket. The Finance Ministry quickly put forth a revised version of the tax code proposal, but many experts criticized President Park's economic team for being ignorant about what can actually help the people's livelihoods. There's also concern that the Finance Ministry and the Deputy Prime Minister are not fulfilling their roles as an economic control tower, but relying on the presidential office of Cheongwade instead. Now, other than that, a lack of communication with the opposition party and the public still remains an area in which President Park needs to improve. Cheongwade explained that if the first 6 months were a period for setting up the blueprint for the Park administration, it'd say it will now speed up its efforts to push ahead with actual measures to revitalize the economy and create more jobs, as well as carrying out sales diplomacy with other countries.
Well, it's hard to believe that it's only been 6 months. Thanks so much, Jinju, for that.
My pleasure.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features restrictions is on the rise. Closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States. The latest report. Less than
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
meeting came on maneuver trying to cover up the South's true intentions.
China's top nuclear envoy Woo Da-wei reportedly arrived in North Korea on this Monday.
The North State-run Korean Central News Agency reports that Woo and his delegation arrived in Pyongyang, but it did not specify a reason for the visit. Experts say that the top priority on Woo's agenda will be convincing the North to return to the stalled six-party denuclearization talks. They also point out that his trip coincides with the 10th anniversary since Beijing chaired the multilateral talks. The six-party talks involving the two Koreas, the United States, China, Japan, and Russia have been at a standstill since 2008. Visiting UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon held high marks for President Park Geun-hye's so-called trust-building process with North Korea.
Our Hwang Sung-hee reports on how Ban gave credit to the president for the recent progress in inter-Korean ties.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says he is very pleased with the recent progress made in inter-Korean relations. Speaking to reporters in Seoul on Monday, the UN chief said the agreement by the Koreas to reopen the Kaesong Industrial Complex, as well as the ongoing talks on the resumption of family reunions, were the outcome of President Park Geun-hye's new North Korea policy.
As the UN Secretary General, I fully support President Park's vision for a fundamental solution to inter-Korean relations through her trust-building process with the North, which includes easing tensions on the Korean peninsula and building trust.
The visiting UN chief said the United Nations has already begun reviewing President Park's proposal for creating a peace park within the demilitarized zone, and added that the UN will fully support the plan once the two Koreas reach an agreement on the issue. When asked whether he would pay a visit to the north, Pan said he was leaving all possibilities open as long as he can contribute to the improvement of inter-Korean ties.
I think it's the role of the UN Secretary General to first allow the concerned parties to resolve issues through dialogue and provide political support on the sidelines. But I will discuss the issue of visiting the North and more with both Koreas at an appropriate time.
Pan also touched upon the looming conflict in Northeast Asia, largely arising from Japan's denial of its historical wrongdoings. The UN chief stressed that the neighboring countries will be able to maintain future-oriented relations only when Japan establishes a correct sense of history, and urged Japanese politicians to act accordingly. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
The prosecution's investigation into the whereabouts of former president and military dictator Chun Doo-hwan's hidden assets continues. On Sunday, authorities said they seized a bank account of Chun's nephew, Lee Jae-hong, who is suspected of keeping millions of dollars of the former leader's slush funds. Lee is accused of managing the Chun family's real estate properties and playing a key role in illegally laundering the family's money. Chun's two eldest sons, Jae-guk and Jae-young, are also expected to be summoned sometime this week. This is part of the prosecution's efforts to collect what the ex-president has yet to pay back to the state. In 1997, he was ordered to pay a fine of some $200 million for staging a coup and accepting bribes. A new report shows 7 out of the top 10 conglomerates in the country cut back on their investments by about 8% in the first half of the year. That's according to CEO Score Monday, which said the top 10's total investment amounted to $32 billion in the first half of the year, 8% lower than the same period last year. The 3 that increased their investments were Hyundai Motor, POSCO, and Hyundai Heavy Industries. The cutbacks come as the Korean economy shows few signs of exiting its prolonged period of low growth. In the face of mounting concerns about radioactive contamination in fish products, the Korean government has decided to intensify inspections of fish caught in its waters as well as imported products. Our Kim Min-ji has the details on the expanded radiation testing.
The Korean government has decided to expand its inspection into fishery products as more and more consumers have expressed concerns about whether fish products are safe to eat due to the leak of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. Starting next month, the government will double the number of inspections on 4 types of fish from the ocean: pollock, mackerel, pike, tuna, and shark, to 90 from the current 45. This intensified checkup is likely to continue until the end of this year. The government will also expand inspections into imported fish products. 6 species of fish, including plaice and pollock, which are usually caught in the Pacific Ocean, will undergo 2 tests each week from the current 1 round. Fish products from Japan will receive inspections each time they are declared. Meanwhile, the National Fishery Products Quality Management Service said that 17 products, which underwent 261 tests for radioactive contamination, were all declared safe to consume as of last Tuesday. The government will post the inspection results of the fish products on the websites of the Fishery Management Service and the Maritime Affairs Ministry twice a week. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is mulling over his legal options to broaden the role of the country's self-defense forces to enable them to defend Japan and also its allies. But as our Kim Ji-yeon reports, nationwide polls show a wave of opposition in Japan.
The Abe administration is making moves to alter Japan's constitution in a way that makes it possible for the country to aid an ally under attack. Kyodo News Agency reported Saturday that Tokyo is seeking a new bill to allow its self-defense forces the right to collective self-defense. The report also added that Abe is expected to even go as far as to try to reinterpret the current laws if the original plan of drafting a new bill fails to win approval. The current law in Japan stipulates that the country's military cannot engage in combat operations and are strictly dispatched to defend the country, which is stated in Article 9 of the country's constitution. If the new bill is approved by the cabinet and the Diet, or a reinterpretation of the constitution is given the green light, the country may be able to respond to an ally's request for military assistance. And furthermore, in case of an emergency, it would allow Japan to dispatch its forces first without a parliamentary approval. Nationwide polls show the majority of Japanese citizens are against Abe's move to grant stronger powers to its forces. According to a recent survey by Kyodo, around 50% of respondents said they were against the move, compared to the 39% that said they supported the prime minister's plan. Other polls show a similar picture. More than 59% of respondents in a poll by the Asahi Shimbun said they were against the new bill, 2 times more than those who supported it. Around 54% of respondents in a poll by the Nikkei Daily said they did not support Prime Minister Abe's move. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The United States may be on the verge of stepping up preparations for a possible military response to last week's alleged chemical weapons attack in Syria. Over the weekend, Washington said Syria's offer to let inspectors in was too late to be credible. Hwang Ji-hye reports on the possible military action.
In a move seen to be stepping closer to possible U.S. military action in Syria, the Obama administration said that the Syrian government probably used chemical weapons against civilians in the suburbs of Damascus last week. A senior official of the U.S. administration said Sunday that President Obama is now weighing how to respond. In a written statement, the official called a Syrian promise to allow United Nations officials to inspect the chemical weapons attack sites, quote, too late to be credible. Syria and the UN agreed to the inspection starting Monday, 5 days after the alleged attack. The official made it clear the Syrian government's move was not enough, adding that if it had nothing to hide, it would have let the UN officials inspect the sites right after the attack was first reported. The statement went on to say that evidence could have been destroyed because of constant bombing and the regime's other actions in the area. Around 1 year ago, President Obama said the use of chemical weapons by Syrian government forces was a, quote, red line. Despite mounting criticism from congressional Republicans and others for failing to respond more strongly to the attack, the president has remained reluctant to intervene in another war in the region after 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Meanwhile, Britain and France have both advocated a strong response if the U.S. decides to take military action. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Egypt's former dictator Hosni Mubarak and 3 Muslim Brotherhood leaders were in the dock on Sunday for separate trials, but on similar charges of involvement in the killing of protesters. Mubarak, who was released from jail last week and placed under house arrest in a military hospital, sat in a wheelchair in a courtroom cage with his sons and former interior minister. Mubarak was given a life sentence last year for complicity in the killing of protesters during the 2011 revolt against him, but an appeals court ordered a retrial. The judge adjourned the case until September 14th. Also Sunday, Muslim Brotherhood leader Mohammed Badieh and 5 other members of the Islamist group had their hearings postponed until October 29th. They are accused in relation to clashes outside the Brotherhood's Cairo headquarters on June 30th that left 9 dead. Firefighters in California are working around the clock battling a massive wildfire that spans hundreds of kilometers. The so-called rim fire is moving fast and growing out of control, threatening Yosemite National Park, along with water and electricity supplies for San Francisco. Connie Lee reports on the inferno.
The so-called rim fire is spreading, with its smoke columns rising more than 9 kilometers. The U.S. Forest Service says a blaze, which has already destroyed 134,000 acres in Northern California, is threatening to consume more of Yosemite Park. At least 15,000 acres of the northeastern edge of the park were consumed, closing down parts of it, threatening natural life and its giant sequoia trees. Yosemite Park, which is designated as a World Heritage Site, is a top tourist attraction in the summer. But as of Sunday, officials say they have no plans to close down the park as a whole. Dry conditions and strong winds are causing the fire to spread, which began on August 17th. And despite efforts by more than 2,000 firefighters, the blaze is less than 10% contained. Officials say more than 5,000 homes are being threatened by the fire, but only few have been destroyed. The wildfire is also threatening power and water supplies to San Francisco, which is about 320 kilometers to the west. Authorities are now hoping to receive extra reinforcements of personnel and aircraft to battle the blaze in the coming days. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
The Korean Baseball Organization has completed the second round of its annual draft designed to bring in a fresh stock of talented baseball players.
And Stephen Che joins us in the Sports Center to give us the details. Stephen.
Hey guys, the second round of the 2013 KBO draft saw 105 young baseball players get chosen to join the top league in Korea. And with the first pick, the NC Dinos chose a little-known high schooler. His name is Bae Jae-hwan, a right-handed senior pitcher for Seoul High School who's only pitched a meager 3 1/3 innings this year with just 9 total appearances in his high school career. This was the second rookie draft of the year for the 9 teams currently competing and also for the expansion KT Wiz, who are set to join the KBO in 2 years' time. Staying with baseball, there were no games played today, so let's get right to the standings. At the top of the order is the Samsung Lions, who fell to second place for a day last week before climbing back to the top. And there was the LG Twins who were responsible for that. They sit just half a game behind the league leaders. All the while, Tucson sits at third, having lost ground to fourth place Nexon, who trailed them by just 1 game. And going to the bottom of the half of the standings, the Lotte Giants are 2 games behind Nexon in fifth, while SK is just 2 games behind them. Playoff chances are still there, but wearing thin. Meanwhile, Kia, NC, and Hanwha occupy the last 3 spots. Moving to the greens, teenage golf prodigy Lydia Ko successfully defended her title at the Canadian Women's Open on Sunday. The 16-year-old South Korean-born New Zealander won her second tournament of the year, closing with a 6-under 64 at the Royal Mayfair Golf Course, beating out the pros by 5 strokes. And being an amateur, she missed out on another $300,000 payday, to which she said, quote, "I don't care." But with a promising future, it's only a matter of time until she cashes in on her talent. That does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
Time to go over to our Kelly Park for the latest forecast. Hello there, Kelly.
Hi, Sean and Tan. Well, you know, it's already the last week of August, and it finally feels like the end to the summer heat is in sight.
Yes, it has felt noticeably cooler in the morning and evening hours recently.
You know, it sure has. Well, normally during this time of the year, we'd be dealing with some severe typhoons, but this summer is actually the first time in 4 years that the peninsula hasn't been directly influenced by any typhoons at all. Now, this is due to the strength of a very large high-pressure system that's currently stretching wide from the southern part of China to Japan. And these are like huge boulders that can block and even force these storm tracks away. And this is how it kept us safe. But, you know, as always, we're not out of the woods just yet. And typhoons could, of course, still develop in fall. And with that in mind, tomorrow we have another beautiful day on tap, but it's still going to be sunny and hot during the afternoon. The morning lows have gotten much cooler recently, so we're definitely looking at nice and fine conditions to start our day. Meanwhile, temperatures will be similar to today's in the upper 20s to the mid 30s, but still above average. Now for more details, let's go over to our numbers. Seoul will hit a high of 31 degrees in the afternoon, while Daegu and Gwangju will jump up to 33 and 32 respectively, and Busan will be a few degrees lower at 31. Now, other regions starting from Daejeon will also hit a high of 31. That goes for Daejeon, Jeju Island as well, and Mount Kumgang will be the lowest, topping out at 22. And that's all for this hour. I'll be back with more updates after midnight.
Well, that's our broadcast on this Monday night. I'm Han Daeun in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.